My name is Alexandra Marie Holden, and I was 35 years old when I finally accepted the truth about my family. Specifically, that they didn't love me for who I was, only for what I could provide. From the outside, my life looked like a quiet success story. I owned a growing chain of fitness centers across North Texas, 4 locations, steady revenue, and plans already in motion for expansion. I employed dozens of people, paid my taxes, and slept well at night knowing every dollar I earned was built through discipline, sacrifice, and years of grinding when no one was watching. I didn't inherit money, I didn't marry into it, I built everything myself, one exhausting decision at a time. But this story isn't about my business. It's about how my family spent years slowly bleeding me dry, and how they reacted when the tap was finally shut off. Growing up in suburban Dallas, there were 2 daughters in our household, me and my younger sister, Camila. She's 3 years younger than I am, and from the moment she was born, the hierarchy was clear. Camila was cherished, protected, endlessly excused. I was expected to cope, adapt, and never need anything. Camila could make a mistake and be comforted. I made one and was told I should have known better. By the time I was 17, I was juggling 2 part-time jobs after school, saving every cent for a used car. Grocery store shifts on weekdays, landscaping work on weekends under the Texas sun. Camila, meanwhile, got caught shoplifting at the mall, and our parents rewarded her with a brand new car to rebuild her confidence. When I asked where my car was after months of saving, my father barely looked up. "You're responsible. You'll figure it out." That sentence followed me for the rest of my life. College wasn't an option for me financially, so I joined the military straight out of high school. Camila somehow had her tuition covered, money that mysteriously appeared whenever she needed it. I came back years later with structure, discipline, and a plan. I lived cheaply, worked relentlessly, and built something real. Camila dropped out of college, bounced between interests, and eventually married Jason. Jason was charming in the shallow, polished way that made people trust him too quickly. He had opinions about things he didn't understand, confidence he hadn't earned, and a talent for spending money that wasn't his. My parents adored him. That was when the phone calls started. At first it was small, a few hundred for utilities, a little help with car repairs. I told myself this was normal, family helping family. But I never heard gratitude from Camila directly. It was always my mother calling. Always explanations, never accountability. Over time, the numbers grew. The reasons multiplied. And a quiet, uncomfortable realization began forming in my chest. I wasn't their daughter. I was their solution. And I had no idea yet how far they were willing to go to keep using me. The money requests didn't arrive all at once. They crept in slowly, disguised as isolated emergencies, each one framed as temporary, unavoidable, and just slightly outside Camila and Jason's control. The first few times, I didn't hesitate. "Camila's electricity might get shut off," my mother said one afternoon, her voice tight with urgency. "It's only $400, just until next week." I transferred the money before she even finished explaining. I told myself it wasn't a pattern yet, just bad timing, just family. But the calls kept coming. $600 for car repairs, $800 for a security deposit because their landlord was being unreasonable, $1,200 because Jason's hours had supposedly been cut and Camila was under so much stress. Every request came with a story. Every story came with emotional pressure. And every transfer ended the same way. Silence from Camila, followed by a polite thank you relayed through my mother, as if my sister were still a teenager and capable of managing her own conversations. It bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I started noticing details I'd previously ignored. Camila's Instagram stories showed new clothes, nights out, weekend trips. Jason always had the latest phone. Their apartment kept getting nicer. Yet somehow, they were always one unexpected bill away from disaster. When I asked gentle questions, just trying to understand where the money was going, I was met with defensiveness. "You don't understand how expensive life is now," Camila snapped once, Not everyone can live like you. Live like me. As if my life had been handed to me fully formed, instead of carved out of exhaustion, discipline, and sacrifice. The amounts increased steadily. 2,000 here, 3,000 there. Each time, my parents framed it as my responsibility. You're the stable one, my mother said. You don't want your sister struggling, do you? And that word, struggling, did a lot of heavy lifting. The breaking point should have come last Christmas. Jason called me directly for the first time ever, his voice trembling as he explained they needed $2,200 for urgent car repairs. They couldn't get to work. They were panicking. He sounded genuinely distressed. I sent the money. 3 days later, Camila posted photos from a luxury spa retreat in Arizona. Designer robes, champagne flutes, a caption about self-care and finally breathing again. I stared at my phone for a long time, something cold settling in my stomach. Still, I didn't confront them. I wanted to believe there was a reasonable explanation. I wanted to believe my sister wouldn't lie to my face, that my parents wouldn't knowingly manipulate me. But the truth was already there. I just wasn't ready to look at it. Then, 8 months ago, I walked into my parents' house for our usual Sunday dinner, and Camila practically shoved her left hand into my face. An engagement ring so large it looked unreal caught the light, sparkling with deliberate drama. "Jason surprised me," she squealed. "Isn't it perfect? I've wanted something like this forever." I looked at Jason. He wouldn't meet my eyes. 4 weeks earlier, he'd cried on the phone about not having health insurance and needing help with medical bills. I smiled politely, my chest tightening. "That's impressive," I said. "Must have cost a lot." Camila laughed, flipping her hair. "Jason always gives me what I deserve." That was the moment something shifted inside me. Because for the first time, I wasn't just being used. I was being mocked. And I knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. After the engagement dinner, something between us shifted into a new, sharper shape. The requests didn't stop, but the tone did. There was less pretending, less shame. It was as if the ring on Camila's finger had given her permission to finally say what she'd always been thinking. Jason became bolder too. He started offering unsolicited advice about my life, my priorities, my future, things he had no experience with and no right to comment on. At one family dinner, while pushing his plate away untouched, he leaned back in his chair and smiled at me like he was doing me a favor. "You know," he said casually, "there's more to life than work. You don't want to end up alone just because you were too obsessed with money." I stared at him, genuinely stunned by the audacity. This was a man who had never paid a bill without help, lecturing me about balance. Camila laughed, not nervously, not awkwardly. She laughed like she agreed. "Jason's right," she added. "What's the point of all that success if you don't have anyone to share it with?" My mother nodded immediately, as if this were some profound insight instead of thinly veiled contempt. "You can't work forever, Alex," she said. "A woman needs a family." I wanted to ask her why Camila's definition of family required my bank account. I wanted to ask why my value as a daughter apparently expired the moment I stopped paying for everyone else's mistakes. But I didn't. I smiled. I swallowed it, like I always did. A week later, my mother called with what she described as wonderful news. Camila and Jason had finalized their wedding plans. It was going to be soon, very soon, just a small, intimate ceremony with immediate family. Elegant, tasteful, and expensive. She didn't ask me directly for money at first. She just talked. She described venues, caterers, floral arrangements. She let the numbers float into the conversation naturally, like I was supposed to catch them and offer. I didn't. So she sighed dramatically and finally said it. "They're a little short on the deposit." "How short?" I asked. There was a pause. 22,000. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It came out sharp and humorless. "Absolutely not." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. "You don't understand," my mother said quietly. "This is important." "No," I replied. "You don't understand. I'm done." The backlash was immediate. Camila sent me a message accusing me of trying to sabotage her happiness. Jason implied I was jealous. My parents called repeatedly, alternating between guilt and anger, but none of it compared to what happened next. Thanksgiving was approaching, and despite everything, my mother insisted we all sit down together, as a family. Something in her voice told me this dinner wasn't about turkey. It was about pressure, and I was walking straight into it. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, my mother called in that overly sweet voice she only used when she wanted something she knew she wasn't entitled to. "Alexandra, sweetheart," she said, dragging out the word like it was meant to soften me. "You are coming for Thanksgiving this year, right?" I almost said no. Every instinct in my body warned me that this wasn't about family or tradition. Every holiday with them had started to feel like a performance, where I played the role of the successful daughter who existed to stabilize everyone else's chaos. But I said yes anyway. That was my mistake. From the moment I arrived at my parents' house on Thanksgiving morning, the atmosphere felt wrong. Camila opened the door instead of my mother, wearing a brand new outfit that still had that stiff, unworn look to it. Her nails were freshly done, long and decorated with tiny crystals that caught the light every time she moved her hands. "Oh my God, Alex," she said, smiling too wide. "We've been waiting for you." Red flag number 1. Jason was in the living room, pretending to scroll through his phone. His knee bounced relentlessly, and when he looked up at me, his smile flickered for just a second before settling back into place. Red flag number 2. Dinner itself started normally enough. My father asked about the gyms, nodded at my answers, and returned to his food. My mother hovered, refilling glasses that weren't empty and rearranging plates that didn't need to be moved. Then, right on schedule, she cleared her throat. That sound, sharp and deliberate, transported me back to childhood, to moments right before I was asked to clean up messes Camila had made. "So," my mother said, cutting into her turkey with surgical precision, "Camila and Jason have some exciting news to share." Camila beamed. Jason swallowed hard. "We're getting married next month," Camila announced. I forced a smile. "Congratulations." My mother clasped her hands together. "It's going to be beautiful, very intimate, just close family." I waited, because there was always a second act. Jason shifted in his chair. "We're just a little short on some of the costs." "How short?" I asked calmly. Camila leaned forward, smiling like this was a joke we were all in on. "It's really not that much when you think about it. Just $22,000. The table went silent. My mother jumped in immediately, rattling off numbers like she'd rehearsed them. Venue, catering, flowers, photography, as if breaking it down would make it reasonable. I looked around the table. Every face was turned toward me, expectant, certain. "And you want me to pay for your wedding," I said. "Not pay for it," Jason corrected quickly. "Just help out, as a gift." Camila laughed. "I mean, what else would you spend your money on? You don't have a husband or kids. Your parents only care when you're paying the bills." The words hit the room like a slap. I turned slowly toward my mother. "Is that true?" She didn't deny it. She smiled. "Well," she said, "if you're not willing to help family, then you're not welcome at family events. You can't come unless you clear your sister's credit card debt." Something inside me finally broke, cleanly, quietly. I stood, picked up my jacket, and smiled back at her. "You're right," I said, "and that's exactly why you'll never see me again." Their faces fell in unison. I walked out without looking back. For 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, my phone didn't stop vibrating. My mother sent long messages about how deeply I'd hurt her, how embarrassed she was by my behavior, how disappointed she felt raising a daughter who would abandon family over money. My father left voicemails lecturing me about loyalty and sacrifice, reminding me that blood was thicker than water and that I was setting a dangerous precedent. Camila's messages were shorter but sharper. She accused me of ruining her wedding, of humiliating her in front of Jason, of proving that success had turned me cold and selfish. Jason sent nothing at all, which somehow felt worse. Then, suddenly, the silence came. No calls, no texts, no guilt, nothing. At first, I thought they'd finally accepted my decision or found another source of funding. I allowed myself to breathe again. I focused on my work. I slept better. The constant low-grade anxiety I'd been carrying for years began to fade. That peace lasted exactly 4 weeks. My phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing payroll at my main location. The caller ID showed Evan, a close friend who worked as a loan officer at a regional bank. "Hey," he said slowly, "this is going to sound weird, but I think you need to know something." My stomach tightened. "What's going on?" "I saw your sister and her husband at our branch today. They were asking about business loans." I frowned. "What kind of loans?" He hesitated. "Loans using your fitness centers as collateral." The room felt suddenly cold. "What do you mean, my fitness centers?" "They had paperwork," Evan continued. "Documents claiming Camila owns 50% of your company. Employment records listing her as director of operations. The numbers didn't add up, so we didn't approve anything, but Alex, those documents were detailed." My hands went numb. I thanked him, hung up, and immediately called my business attorney. What we uncovered over the next few days was worse than I'd imagined. Camila and Jason hadn't just tried one bank. They'd approached several. They'd forged ownership documents, created fake employment histories, even listed my revenue and assets in professional-looking packets. They were trying to commit large-scale financial fraud using my name. That was the moment my anger hardened into something sharper, clearer. This wasn't entitlement anymore. This was a crime. I spent the next 6 weeks quietly gathering information. I didn't confront them. I didn't warn them. I watched. I learned the wedding was still happening, scaled down, spun online as a deliberate choice for intimacy. I learned Camila was telling people I'd been unsupportive and jealous, that I'd chosen not to attend. Then I learned something else, something that explained everything. Jason had a history, a long one. Previous marriages, short timelines, financial entanglements that always ended the same way, with him walking away and someone else left drowning in debt. And Camila had no idea. That's when I realized walking away wasn't enough. They hadn't just used me. They'd crossed a line they could never uncross. Once I understood what Camila and Jason had tried to do with my business, everything snapped into focus with brutal clarity. The desperation, the sudden rush to get married, the urgency behind the money. None of it was romantic. It was structural, like a collapsing building being propped up with lies just long enough to trap someone inside. I didn't call them, I didn't text, I didn't confront. Instead, I paid attention. I spoke carefully to people I trusted. A banker here, an accountant there. Nothing dramatic, just quiet conversations that filled in the missing spaces. And what emerged was a picture far uglier than I'd expected. They weren't just struggling, they were drowning. The emergencies over the past 2 years hadn't been exaggerated. They'd been real, just never honest. Camila and Jason were juggling maxed out credit cards, payday loans with obscene interest rates, and personal debts borrowed from friends who'd started asking uncomfortable questions. Every dollar I'd sent hadn't fixed anything. It had only delayed the inevitable. What stunned me most was that Camila didn't seem to know the full truth. Jason had been managing the numbers, filtering the panic, presenting just enough stress to justify help without revealing the actual scope of the damage. He'd kept her focused on appearances while the foundation rotted underneath them. And then there was Jason's past. I obtained records that painted a clear, repeating pattern. Previous marriages that lasted just long enough to merge finances. Divorces that left behind debt, legal disputes, and ruined credit. Always for the other person. He walked away clean. Someone else paid the price. Camila was next. The wedding took place on a Saturday in February. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. Instead, I sent a carefully assembled file, screenshots, documents, timelines, financial records, to someone who would understand exactly what it meant. Jason's mother. She came from money, old money, the kind that valued reputation over emotion and appearances over excuses. She believed her son was marrying into stability. She believed Camila was financially secure. She believed a lie. I corrected that. By Monday morning, my phone rang. It was Camila. She sounded like she'd been hollowed out. He left, she whispered. He took everything. Her voice cracked as she explained. Jason had cleaned out their accounts, taken the wedding gifts, vanished before sunrise. His family had confronted him and then cut him off completely. I listened. I didn't interrupt. For the first time in her life, Camila had nothing cushioning her fall. And for the first time in mine, I didn't rush in to catch her. Camila, we sat across from each other in a small coffee shop near one of my gyms. The kind of place she'd never have chosen before. Too plain, too quiet, too real. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but emotionally. Like the certainty she'd always carried had finally drained out of her. She didn't waste time. I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup and waited. The rent's due, she continued, words tumbling out now. The cards are maxed. I owe people money. I didn't know it was this bad, Alex. I swear I didn't. I believed her. That didn't change anything. How much? I asked. She hesitated, then swallowed. At least 50,000. Maybe more. The number hung between us. For a moment, I saw the future she wanted, the one where I sighed, transferred the money, and quietly erased the consequences like I always had, where nothing really changed. I set my cup down. No, I said. Her eyes filled immediately. Please, I'll do anything. I'll get a job. I'll pay you back. I just need help getting out of this. I leaned forward slightly, keeping my voice steady. Camila, this is getting out of it. This is the part where you finally feel what your choices cost. She broke down then, crying openly, shoulders shaking. For a second, the old reflex kicked in, the instinct to fix, to protect, to smooth things over. I let it pass. You've spent your entire life protected from consequences, I continued. So have Mom and Dad, and it's ruined all of you. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe she didn't. 6 months later, my mother told me Camila had filed for bankruptcy. She was working 2 jobs, living in a studio apartment, and finally paying her own bills for the first time in her adult life. My parents were furious with me for not stepping in, for not being the bigger person. I told them the same thing I'd told Camila. Some lessons can't be bought away. Camila still calls occasionally now. She doesn't ask for money anymore. She asks how I'm doing. Sometimes she even listens. It's awkward, slow, uncertain, but for the first time, it's real. And that's the only kind of family I'm willing to have now.